Federal Executive Council meeting takes far-reaching measures towards repositioning the nation's mining sector. As World marks International Youth Day, Ministry of Science and Technology advocates acquisition of digital skills to tackle unemployment. Plus, Russia refutes allegation that its COVID-19 vaccine is unsafe. I am Jummai Yusuf. Far-reaching measures have been taken by the federal government towards repositioning the nation's mining sector in furtherance of efforts at diversifying the economy for sustainable national development. Consequently, the National Security Advisor has been directed to coordinate targeted operations against illegal mining activities nationwide, while states and local governments have been warned to desist from illegal mining taxation. Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed made this known while briefing newsmen on resolutions of the Federal Executive Council meeting. Details will come to you in our subsequent bulletin. In another development, the Federal Executive Council has approved 8.49 billion naira for the procurement of necessary equipment for the testing of coronavirus aimed at controlling and containing community spread of the global pandemic in the country. The Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Ehenere, announced this while briefing newsmen after the meeting of the council presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari. State House correspondent Adam Musambos reports that the council also approved a national gender action plan and climate change.
It was the 20th meeting of the Federal Executive Council for the year 2020 and 11th to be held virtually in the new normal. The ravaging coronavirus pandemic, which affected over 580 local government areas of the country, dominated discussions sequel to an NCDC memo submitted by the Minister of Health. A request for 8.49 billion naira from the Special Intervention Fund for COVID-19 being operated by the Presidential Task Force was therefore approved towards expanding its testing and diagnostic capabilities.
So we are procuring testing materials from sample materials to other kits for diagnostics in our laboratory systems to be able to respond properly to the community transmission phase. We have already made plans to have at least one sample collection site in every local government, minimum of 774, and these resources will be necessary to go around the 774 local government areas to ensure that persons in rural areas or small towns are not excluded, and to ensure that not only the big cities are the ones being attended to.
The Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, on his part, responded to the recently held political rallies in parts of the country, maintaining government's position that for now, mass gatherings remain prohibited.
We will continue to advise social distancing in whatever gathering. It has been proven that wearing a mask saves many lives, saves you, saves the other people, and we will continue to harp on people to please take personal responsibility. We are deepening our conversations with the subnationals, with the governors, with the local government chairmen, with everybody, with all stakeholders. Please take personal responsibilities. If anybody says that wearing mask is inconvenient, let him try a ventilator.
The Federal Executive Council also approved a new policy towards mainstreaming gender within the Climate Change Action Plan called the National Gender Action Plan and Climate Change.
Being the ones bearing the most brunt, it means that we take particular interest to make sure that women are involved in climate action activities right from the inception, design, development, implementation, monitoring and evaluation of projects. Also to involve women in positions of decision making to make sure that women are carried along in climate change issues.
The minister enumerated agriculture, forestry, health, water and sanitation, energy, as well as transportation as areas of priority in the Gender Action Plan aimed at reducing gas emissions in Nigeria by 45% before the year 2030.
The Federal Minister of Environment will be the one to drive the implementation. but it's something that involves everybody.
The National Gender Action Plan, Dr. Muhammad Mahamood explained, is to be funded by, amongst others, proceeds from the Green Bond, support from international donor agencies, as well as special budgetary provisions for ministries, departments and agencies. From the State House, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
To other matters now, thousands of medical supplies worth more than $8 million have been airlifted to some member nations of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, by the Nigerian Air Force. The operation is aimed at fighting COVID-19 in Africa with support from the ECOWAS COVID-19 response champion, President Muhammadu Buhari, and the West African Health Organization. The first correspondent, Nja'atu Tijani, reports.
Carrying tons of much-needed personal protective gear and other medical supplies, NAF 917, the Charlie 130 Hercules, is on a mission to keep the promise made by President Muhammadu Buhari, the ECOWAS COVID-19 Response Coordination Champion.
Our first port of call is the Aéroport International Diori Hamani. That is the Diori Hamani International Airport in Niger. One of the places where the medical supplies are being uploaded. The whole operation is being overseen by the Nigerian Air Force with support from the federal government.
Handing over the supplies follows the same pattern in Mali and Burkina Faso in the final phase of the operation, which has seen the dispatch of the medical supplies to a total of 14 member states, including Nigeria.
This operation is huge. We at WAHO had secured goods before that were a tenth of what we are distributing here. And it cost us so much to get this to all the countries. But it was necessary at the time because we needed to get laboratory materials to countries to be able to test for COVID-19. And so I couldn't be prouder of His Excellency and the people and government of Nigeria, but also the solidarity amongst all ECOWAS countries. I'm proud of the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar and his boys. I couldn't be more proud of them. And women, men and women.
Representatives of the member nations say the gesture has demonstrated Nigeria's good leadership and solidarity with the sub-region. Currently, confirmed COVID-19 cases on the African continent stand at more than 1 million. African leaders, especially those in the ECOWAS, say they will keep fighting to keep the numbers down by focusing on protection and prevention. Naja'atu Tijani, NTA News.
And as coronavirus cases surge in Europe, Russia says allegation that its COVID-19 vaccine is unsafe are baseless. Joyce Ometu is here with an update on the pandemic.
Russia's Health Minister Mikhail Murashko said allegations that Russia's COVID-19 vaccine was unsafe were groundless and driven by competition. The country's decision to grant its approval has raised concerns among some experts, and some scientists fear that Russia may be putting national prestige before safety. In Germany, the government has urged citizens to adhere to public health guidelines as the country recorded its highest daily increase in coronavirus cases after 3 months. Germany's response had been widely seen as successful in slowing the spread of the virus, but the country on Wednesday reported 1,226 new infections. Still in Europe, face masks became compulsory in all public places in Brussels as the number of COVID-19 infections led to a government alert. The city is the worst affected in that region. Turning attention to Asia, Hubei province in China has reported a coronavirus case where the patient tested positive again after recovering. The 68-year-old woman who earlier tested positive on February 8 recovered a few months later, but tested positive again on August 9 and is now under quarantine and treatment. In the meantime, statistics by Worldometer published at 6 p.m. show that cases worldwide have reached 20,620,330, out of which 13,519,612 persons have recovered, while 748,002 deaths are recorded. Africa has 1,069,739 cases, 23,929 deaths, and 762,303 recovered patients. In Nigeria, the Center for Disease Control said out of the 47,290 infected persons, 33,609 have been treated and discharged, while 956 fatalities were recorded. And that's it from here. I am Joyce Ometu.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, has tested negative for COVID-19 after 3 weeks isolation. In a statement on his Twitter handle, the minister expressed gratitude to God, President Muhammadu Buhari, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, the medical team, operation relations, friends, colleagues, religious leaders, and numerous well-wishers. He said their care, prayers, fasting, messages of support, and encouragement were there for him as he never walked alone. 292 evacuees from the United Arab Emirates have arrived the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, Wednesday on board an Emirates flight at about 2:30 p.m. local time. This number brings to 2,933 the total number of evacuees from the UAE. In a tweet, the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission said all evacuees tested negative to COVID-19 and will proceed on a 14-day self-isolation as mandated by the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, Federal Ministry of Health and Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. You're watching the news on NTA International. We shall be right back. More reports when we return. Don't go away.
Love is such a beautiful thing. But what happens when love hits the rocks?
Please leave me alone.
When things turn sour.
Tell me the truth.
But this was for you, babe. Really? Yes.
And you fear the damage cannot be fixed.
But I don't want to lose my wife.
No, keep it there.
When relationships are in desperate need to be mended, that's where we come in.
NTA International News. Africa as it is.
Thanks for joining us. Now, the aim of this year's International Youth Day is to shed light on the need to enable the engagement of youth by making local, national and global institutions more inclusive for the purpose of strengthening their capacity and relevance to achieve global action. This is why the Minister of State for Science and Technology, Mohammed Abdullahi, is advocating the acquisition of digital skills that can serve as a hedge against unemployment risk. Justin Bem Unyi reports.
The present global pandemic has revealed more than ever the power of technology to drive, coordinate and enable business continuity and build resilience in the current situation. And this comes handy as this year's International Youth Day is being celebrated with a focus on youth engagement for global action.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed.
For the Minister of State, Science and Technology, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed how the world functions, illustrating the limitations of many existing systems and highlighting the need to view the role of technology as a leveler for economic productivity and growth.
The development of digital skills is an important part in building resilience to economic and social shocks like those presented by the COVID-19 outbreak.
Consequently, an NGO, the Africa Scholars Care Initiative, has keyed in to ensure 100 young girls are intensively trained and empowered in ICT.
We are taking the opportunity of the International Youth Day to be able to preach out the word that we need more women in inclusion.
The federal government had recently approved the Youth Investment Fund of about 75 billion naira in the next 3 years to enable youths access funds to support their startup business on very friendly conditions and less cumbersome protocols. Justin Bemunyi, NTA News.
And to speak more on this year's International Youth Day celebration, we have in the studio Albert Bosha Nzeko, Program Manager Development and for Children, Women and Youth, DivAid. Glad to have you join us on the news. The theme of this 2020 International Youth Day is Youth Engagement for Global Action. Can you give us an insight into what it entails?
Yes, the International Youth Day 2020 with the theme Youth Engagement for Global Action is a connection of the three-way connection. Youth engagement at both the local community level, looking at youth participation and engagement at the national level, at the country level, helping in the formulation of policies, and then at the global stage, which is the international community, where youth actions, youth voices are heard, youth views and opinions also make up the policies in making the country or the world a better place. So this year's theme tries to capture all the youth's engagement and how youth properly and efficiently will work to create a sustainable country.
Okay, the world is still reeling from the shock of COVID-19 pandemic and how it has affected economies the world over, with attendant consequences of job losses. What do you think the youth should do to earn a living and create employment for themselves?
Well, the youths are the future of the world. So equipping youths, equipping themselves with requisite skills, lifelong transferable skills, would go a long way in positioning them well for future employment. Yes, it is very true that a lot of persons, especially youths, have been most impacted by the effects of the COVID-19. A recent International Labour Organization study, which was released recently, showed over 600 million people out of job, and majority of these persons are youths. So youths need to position themselves, get proper education, get the requisite skills, lifelong skills that will be able to position them well for the future of work.
Okay, post-COVID-19, we're looking at a new world order, driven by technology. And believe me, Nigerian youth are some of the most brilliant, the most innovative in the world. So going by this theme, are we calling for a global action in engaging youths?
Yes, we are. As a matter of fact, as a youth advocate for education, we have, with the support of UNICEF, always advocated for inclusive education, safe and quality education. We believe education is a tool for national development, and when our youths and children are not properly educated, there's a disconnect. So we need a system, we need proper funding for education, where our youths and children get quality education, which will build them up and position them effectively to take over from the next generation. Of course, the world having a gap between this generation, a skills gap between this generation and the next would mean a catastrophic end for our world. So it requires all hands, it requires the youth to have proper education.
Okay, on a final note, before we go, what advice do you have for Nigerian youth as we go into, the next, we don't know what we call it, post-COVID-19, is it going to end? We don't know. What advice do you have for the youths out there?
Well, I would always advise the youths to build up your skills, be resilient. Of course, our adults, we encourage our adults to always listen to the youth, and then create a good network post-COVID-19 and ensure that going forward, all the aspects which have been affected, the youths can weather the storm and then come out stronger.
Okay, Albert Bosch Anzeko, Program Manager, Development Aid for Children, Women and Youths, Div 8. Thank you so much for your insight on the International Youth Day.
Thank you very much.
A report by Parent Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PAC, on the National Homegrown School Feeding Program in the midst of COVID-19 has been presented to journalists at a media briefing in Abuja. Elizabeth Omori reports that details of the findings also captured recommendations and prospects for the future.
During COVID-19 lockdown, economies were shut down and schools closed. To this end, the federal government restructured the homegrown school feeding program to cushion the effect of the lockdown. Parker is one of the partners that facilitated the program. Sequel to this, the center presented a feedback that covered 6 area councils of the FCT, namely Abaji, Buari, Kuje, Gwagwalada, Kwali and Amak. Introduction of vouchers, authentication of beneficiaries and provision of 7 selected raw food items to families of public school pupils in primary 1 to 3 were some of the modifications adopted. The process, however, was not without challenges.
Most of the respondents could not participate in the scheme because distribution of packaged food items did not reach their communities. Others indicated that respondents were simply denied vouchers and certain venues were invaded by thugs.
Recommendations were also made.
There is a need for the federal government to prioritize the establishment of a centralized, comprehensive socio-demographic database to assist the implementation of programs.
The school feeding program already has a database plan. We already have a portal. It's just that we're trying to scale up the data collection process.
The report called for improved sensitization in order to ensure wide participation of the program. In Abuja, Elizabeth Omori, NTA News.
Protecting national parks from bandits in line with the directive of Mr. President is the focus of a tripartite meeting of the Ministers of Environment, Interior and Agriculture. Onegie Fine-Face reports on these and the request of Gombe State Governor for federal government support to mitigate erosion ravaging his state.
7 national parks and several game reserves in Nigeria are natural flora and fauna preserved to sustain biological diversity and ecosystem balance. Although considered inadequate, local militia comprising bandits and cattle rustlers continues to impugn on the safety of national parks. Ministers of Environment, Interior and Agriculture are having conversations on how best to improve security of national parks and game reserves across the country.
Various illegal activities of militia in and around the national parks and other categories of protected areas has necessitated the need to strengthen the service with trained and equipped personnel to protect and safeguard the national parks and its natural resources.
As the Ministry of Agriculture, we are interrelated with this problem on so many fronts, even in providing security, the development of livestock within the parks.
Empowering the wildlife and park rangers, as well as stimulating collaboration between all security agencies in that regard, will go a long way in safeguarding our security in Nigeria.
Similarly, the Minister of Environment played host to the Governor of Gombe State, Mohammed Inuwa Yahaya. The Governor is requesting support of the federal government to tackle gully erosion, desertification and other environmental challenges confronting Gombe.
Gully erosion and desertification, it has made us to be very vulnerable and very exposed to the vagaries of weather and climate change.
Gombe State currently has a special program to plant 4 million trees in 4 years to mitigate its environmental concerns. In Abuja, Onengiye Fine-Face, NTA News.
And sports update, football experts intensify advocacy for improved administrative structures nationwide. Bade Adele has more.